After several years of fighting, we, the Kuomintang, crawled ourselves up from exile and established a presence in China. We would soon expand it to encompass Beiping and all warlord states except Fengtiang, who we still are at war with. Currently, we are modernizing our nation to prepare for the last steps of total unification of China, the destruction of Fengtiang. However, our army is disoriented after the massive expansion of our lands and a partial demobilization is needed. And at the same time we must prepare for Japanese aggression. Being friends with Fengtiang, they are sure to join the war sooner or later. With our industrial modernization already done and our economic future looking brighter than ever, we won't have to focus on it and can instead turn to our army. Since we still need divisions on the Fengtiang border, we won't be able to demobilize all our troops, but they who fought against the warlords in the west will be. So we held the disbandment conference to decide on how everything should be organized. We chose to start with division reorganization, turning our irregular infantry into standardized infantry and supporting them with radios. Then, to fully heal our army, we dealt with all warlord and Qing generals. Only those with progressive tendencies were allowed to join, the others will need to find another job. While this was enough to get our army organized and training, we still have work. As our forces expanded our territory, several military factories were seized. Some of them have special expertise we can use, such as Noriko, who will help us produce more and better artillery, and Fa Motors, who will also make our motorized better as well as making them cheaper so we can remove our deficit. Finally, the last thing before we can start to use our army against Fengtiang is to redraw our military regions, to help our high command to organize and divide our forces. So with our army ready for Fengtiang and partially ready for Japan, we can start our offensive to Manchuria. For some reason they had a gap in their front so that we could capture Zhangyuan for free and stage our offensive from its supply hub. They tried to fill the gap, but it was too late. Utilizing it, we entered northern Shahar state and could partially encircle their divisions in the state. While some managed to escape, we still crushed several of them by fully encircling them. With their defenses now severely weakened in the Beiping region as well, we started a second offensive. Once again they stood no chance and we had soon captured Chengde and Shanghiaguan. They tried to set up a defense in a city further east, but it eventually fell as well. Fearing a total collapse of Fengtiang, the Japanese decided to invite them to the co-prosperity sphere and join the war. This has opened two fronts, a small one in Qingdao and a larger against Siam, but it also brings the threat of naval invasion, which is why we have around half our army stationed in ports along the coast. Hopefully this and our soldiers being eager to fight for China will be enough, but to be certain we will soon start construction of coastal defenses. Before the Japanese had the time to send more troops to Qingdao, we attacked the city. Despite their air force inflicting a lot of damage, our superior numbers allowed us to enter the city and destroy its garrison. Turning to Fengtiang, we had wanted to attack before the Japanese arrived, but due to the supply hubs not being operational yet, we couldn't start it. So one supply finally arrived. A few Japanese had already reinforced the front, but they were way too few, allowing us to choose to only battle Fengtiang divisions, making our offensive way easier. After a few battles, we had broken through completely and started marching towards their capital. It was completely open, but just as we started crossing the river, Japanese troops arrived and counterattacked. The offensive was so successful it stopped us from entering the city and even helped the Fengtiang army to reinforce the front. While the success has a lot to do with their forces' strengths, it also has to do with their air force. Being completely uncontested, it can inflict heavy casualties, and it is also destroying our trains in a worrying pace. To fight back, we have founded the Central Aviation School and started researching aircrafts. But since it will take time, we have also decided to research armored trains. Since we have been stopped in Fengtiang and any offensives look difficult due to the air situation, we have changed our focus to Siam. Not much has happened on this border. We have lost the province and Liangguang has captured a Vietnamese city. So by setting pressure, we might be able to remove the threat of a land invasion from the south. We started our attack from the Vietnamese city. Despite attacking from 4 sides, they effectively held us back and we could only secure a small province after bringing in reinforcements. Sadly, this offensive led to an attack from Siam, which captured 1 province from us. Seeing no effective way to continue, we decided to stop our attack and accept the status quo. With no real opportunities in Manchuria either, all we can do is to wait for our air force to come into existence. While we waited, we could finally start to produce armored trains, which is needed more than ever, since as fast as our normal trains get out of the factory, they are destroyed. We've also trained our soldiers in mountain and hill combat, something we will have a lot of use for, and created the Ministry of State Security to start counter-espionage activities. Sadly, the extra armor on our trains didn't help at all, so we were more than happy once our fighter aircrafts finally entered production, especially since the Fengtian had used our supply issues to take back land. As soon as the fighters were built, they were sent to Beiping to help our armed forces. Luckily, the aviation school has been a great success, especially after we allowed women to join it. With our industry just having surpassed the Japanese, we will hopefully be able to produce more airplanes and slowly turn the air war to our side. About 4 months later, we have more than 200 fighters deployed who are already starting to shoot down Japanese airplanes. Additionally, we have begun the construction of an anti-air wall on the northern coast. Both these have let us to slowly start to rebuild our terrain fleet. It has also aided us to stop the Fengtian offensive after they recaptured Shaoyang and Chengde. During these 4 months, we also mobilized our whole economy for the war after having upgraded our conscription laws. With the extra manpower, we started training 48 new divisions to expand our army to about 2 million men. Some months later, air superiority over Beiping and full supply in Manchuria was established. This means one thing: renewed offensives. However, firstly we had to deal with the first successful Japanese naval invasion. After the legation cities joined the Reichspakt, they have tried to land in their territories. As they landed in Ningbo, we sent a reserve army to the city and kicked them out. However, this might have been the Japanese plan, because as we captured the city, a massive naval invasion was conducted against our Qingdao defenses. Fortunately, we were strong enough to keep the port out of Japanese hands, and we were so confident we let some of their forces land only to destroy them and capture everyone to the last man. Finally, we tried to push back a Japanese invasion of Shanghai, but sadly failed. At last, our Manchurian forces were allowed to restart attacks. We tried a long time to capture Changde, but with the massive numbers of Fengtian troops who had entrenched themselves, supported and trained by the Japanese army, we failed every time. The offensive was completely stopped as Japan landed in Tianjin, capitulating the legation cities. While it looked scary at first, there wasn't many forces who landed, and despite several reinforcements arriving, we could capture the city and destroy all forces. Looking back to Fengtian, something is needed to break the stalemate. We considered to build tanks like the French and British, but seeing how the war went for them, we decided to do something no nation has used extensively: paratroopers. Not only will this allow us to use our growing aircraft expertise, but with the support of our newly developed close air support, they could cause havoc on enemy troops. A long time later, despite 2 Japanese naval invasions, 24 paratrooper divisions that are specialized in combat insertion are ready to strike. So they will hopefully scare the soul out of Fengtian and Japan and turn the war to our side. This has been our greatest military operation yet. Not only did we defeat Feng Tian, but all of Korea has been occupied and more than 350,000 Japanese troops were captured in Busan alone. They could use this offensive to naval invade Guangzhou and Hong Kong, but this doesn't really matter. Both stability and war support is plummeting in their home islands, and if they don't succeed to take back Korea, they will be forced to surrender. However, to hurry up their imminent defeat, we've also started construction of airports in southern Korea to threaten the Japanese Isles with our paratroopers. After only about 30 days, we had constructed big enough airports to host 1,200 airplanes. And with our 24 paratroopers ready to execute their orders, we began the battle for Japan. Surprisingly, no fighters were protecting the Japanese mainland. This is because they had sent most of their air force to Taiwan and Guangzhou, hoping to turn the war from there. This has to be the biggest miscalculation in history, because we could now launch our operation without any opposition. Before landing in any cities, our paratroopers captured all southern airfields to stop their air force to hurt our next step, landing around ports and spreading out across the Japanese country. After only a few hours, Hiroshima was encircled and Kokura and Kumamoto were captured. With Nagasaki soon to fall, the Japanese finally asked for peace. While it would be best to utterly destroy the Japanese army and see our flag in Tokyo, they have already assembled a huge force to destroy our operations. And with the Japanese Navy standing in the way of bringing in reinforcements, we have to accept. But this is not bad. Not only will Feng Tian be ours, but the Korean Republic has been established, and all of the legation cities are annexed. While Qingdao will be granted back to the Germans in the fear of a war, we have at last unified most of China. So we declared the unification of China, and with the legation cities gone, we can finally tear up all unfair treaties that have been put on all of China for far too long. We will also start the process of integrating Liangguang and Shaanxi into the Republic. With war now over, the political rifts have opened up. The more radical and authoritarian RCA and their leader and chairman of the Kuomintang, Wang Jingwei, against Song Xingling's more moderate faction, the PAC, naturally calls for a third and last repatriation congress to decide the course of our republic, are growing louder than ever. And soon it was announced. Immediately during the opening speech, it became apparent that the party is no longer united, and this congress will be the battleground to decide the future of the Kuomintang. Wang Jingwei received substantial support from Liangguang and Shaanxi. Luckily, however, most syndicalist support went to the PAC due to the World Society faction aligning with them. And with the support from the liberals, who are surprisingly strong, we managed to re-strengthen the PAC alliance and fight back against Wang Jingwei, who will turn us into a dictatorship. Finally, Song Xingling had collected enough strength to call for a vote of no confidence against him. And with a majority in the Congress and the party, the vote was successful and Song Xingling was sworn as the new president of the Republic of China. However, this democratic change was not well received from Wang's side of the party. Many resigned from the executive yuan, and pro-RCA radio stations began calling the event an armed coup. Riots soon started spreading around China, calling for the return of Wang. To try and calm them down with the help of the military only led to our allies from the liberal and syndicalist parties to question us. And even worse, our war minister has not been seen for a day. 2 days later, the police found him dead, killed by extremists. Arrest warrants were immediately issued for Wang Jingwei and his allies, but they fled Nanjing and with a group of sympathizing generals have launched a rebellion. So we have reached the boiling point. The new government is in chaos and the prospect of a civil war is looming. To try and bring the government back together, Song called for a unity government. Luckily, with the majority of the army loyal to the PAC, we could force most factions to the negotiation table. This brought enough unity to encircle all rebelling cities and force Wang and his loyal officers to surrender. However, instead of putting him to trial, we decided to forgive him and instead send him into a de facto exile by making him an ambassador. In the end, the civil war was averted and the PAC and its allies have come out as the clear winners of the conference. While unity quickly collapsed between them, it was quickly resolved by Song Xingling through different methods. So, with stability back, the first major reform can be made, a land reform. After a long debate between the moderates and radicals in the PAC, the moderates won and would pursue a moderate land reform. That the moderates are the strongest in the faction has actually drastically changed the power dynamic between the PAC and the other factions in the Kuomintang. Because the moderates are in favor of negotiations, which has both strengthened the syndicalists and the social liberals. However, after the purging of the totalists, it would be the liberal RF faction who would be the clear winner. Especially after their leader Sun Fu, the only son of Sun Yat-sen, was appointed as a political advisor. With his faction now having grown strong enough, he has started to work to turn us into a real democracy. By joining the moderate Social Democrats in a coalition and holding a conference to discuss the plans for the Kuomintang and a future national constitution. Despite Song Xingling staying as president, Sun Fu got promoted to second in command, and his faction surged in strength. The true reforms and the will of Sun Yat-sen can now start. While this went on, Liang Guang and Shang Shi were fully integrated into the Republic, and our army started preparations for future war. One of those was Qin Yang. However, before we attacked them, we demanded that they would join us, and fortunately for everyone, they accepted and became an associated governorate of us. Back to the political front, democratic parties were legalized and welcomed into the new system. And there and everyone else's constitutional freedoms were guaranteed, granting us massive bonuses. While democracy is coming along, the politicized military is standing in the way. By first honoring all great military men such as Chiang Kai-shek, we got on their good side, allowing us to end their political influence much easier and with only a slight loss of political power. This got us substantial support from liberal intellectuals that have decided to start helping us in our reforms. Because we are now on the final stretch to democracy and the third stage of Sun Yat-sen's reforms, elections. All throughout China, local elections will be held and our country will be decentralized drastically. No longer will the central government decide everything, but the regional leaders elected through fair and square elections will decide what is best for their residents. So we have done it, the dream of Sun Yat-sen has been realized and democracy is achieved. This means while Sun Fu and the RF continue their reforms, we can turn to foreign policy and start the liberation of Asia. Fortunately, most of the work has already been done for us. India, which for a long time was a British puppet state, has gained more and more independence throughout the years. And despite embargoes from France and the UK due to our syndicalist past, relations with America are friendly after our democratic reforms, so the rest of the Entente will surely follow. Additionally, most German colonies have been kicked out of Asia. However, we still need to ask for Qingdao and other of our port cities back. So the only real war that has to be fought is against Japan, both to liberate Taiwan and to free their people from Hirohito and the ultra-nationalist party forbidding any elections. To prepare for this war, our air force has expanded as our amount of paratroopers, and finally modern tanks have been built. But first we formed the Sino-Pacific Friendship Association and demanded the return of our concession ports. First we asked for Macau, but they refused, so we sent our army to the city and seized it despite the risk of war. Fortunately, they were way too scared to resist and simply abandoned the city. Next up were the German ports. This time we assembled our army outside the cities before demanding them, but they still refused. Not necessarily scared of the Germans, we attacked the city and just like Portugal, they simply abandoned them. This led to the complete collapse of German East Asia as they lost their only states left, and so a peace deal was signed between Germany and Japan. This sets the stage for one last showdown. Us against Japan, democracy against dictatorship. Our plan for victory is simple, utilizing our new jet aircrafts and paratroopers to first capture Taiwan, then land on the Japanese mainland for a second time. And this time we won't have to worry as much about the Japanese Navy, because we have enough transport planes to supply our forces from the air. And we have cast that can do some damage on their navy. A month before we declared war, the Japanese, unbeknownst of our plans, declared war on Australasia and subsequently the whole Entente. This is great news since it will strengthen our relations as we join the war as well. On the 12th of February, right after our New Year's festival, we declared war. With the Japanese Air Force elsewhere, we immediately had complete air superiority so that we could launch the first step of our plan. It all went by so quick. In only a day, the whole island had been captured with only 7 casualties. With air superiority over the Japanese mainland as well, we can move to step 2 of our plan. The combination of tank, paratroopers and CAS has been proven to be unstoppably successful. While we have lost 10 paratrooper divisions due to the risky nature of the operations, the amount of Japanese losses are far exceeding that. So we staged hopefully our last offensive towards Nagoya and Tokyo. Since our CAS had destroyed their supply by bombing trains and trucks, their forces caved in rather quickly. However, their surprising amount of reinforcements still made the battle difficult. By encircling as many forces as we could, their defenses were thinned out so that we could capture Nagoya despite their reinforcements. In the north, Kanazawa was also captured, encircling a ton of divisions in a peninsula north of the city. While we could just continue to Tokyo from here, the mountains in the way will make it difficult. So why not end this war the same as it started, with paratroopers? Hopefully 24 of them will be enough. And yes, it was. Despite several divisions garrisoning the cities, we overwhelmed them so much that Tokyo was captured, and as we started attacking from the main front, they surrendered. A peace deal will soon be agreed upon, but since we did almost all fighting, we will get almost everything. However, first, Siam and their puppets in Indochina have to be defeated. It was super simple. So this is all we got in the peace deal. In Japan, we did as we promised, established a democratic state. And in the Philippines and Indonesia, we did the same thing. Finally, Vietnam and Laos were established, while our Thai land were given back to the Entente, as was Malaysia after the British asked for it. However, we only gave it under the deal of lifted embargoes and moderate self-rule in Malaysia. Finally, Asia has been liberated and our country is safe from any foes. What comes now is further democratic reforms and substantial investments into our new liberated countries, as well as friendly nations like Mongolia, Tibet and India. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to not miss future content. See you there!